Hello, I'm James, and I'm here at IndieCade 2017 with Aaliyah. She's got an amazing, awesome new card game that is unlike anything I've ever seen. I believe it's pronounced Objectif.
Yes, that's right, Objectif.
Cool.
Yeah.
So with this game, it's give us an explanation of what yours is, and then I'll tell you how I felt after playing it.
Okay, so Objectif is a game, it's a social game where each round there's a judge, and so there are other players who are competing to place cards. Each of the cards is a portrait of a woman, like an illustrated portrait, and so all of these players are competing to place the most attractive card as determined by who's ever judging the round. So you sort of maybe make inferences about people if you're playing with a group of strangers, as we just did, and try to decide what you think they'll find attractive.
And when you told me I was sitting down because it was just passing by and it caught my interest because I love card games, you said it was similar to Cards Against Humanity. Once I started playing it, I was like, I see what you're saying because I love the judgment coming from each person. But it's not what I would call a comedy game. Immediately, I felt uncomfortable because I was opening up to everybody around me, but like, what do I think beauty is? I feel so shallow sometimes. How do you feel? Is that something that you're trying to bring out in people? Is like show people all the sides of like how quick we are to judge? Like, what is your objective?
Yeah, so actually that's an important feature to mention is that the judge, unlike those other games like Cards Against Humanity or Apples to Apples, the judge in this game has to explain why they're choosing a card. So they're looking at this woman and they're saying, I like these eyes or I like these features. And so all of the other players are discussing that. And so the game really was created to promote a dialogue, an open dialogue about race and beauty and the relationship between those things. If you noticed in this card game, there's probably more black women and women of color in this game than any other game in existence. And so that was definitely a part of my goal is to get people. I know that people tend to make these snap judgments and we don't want to talk about them because we don't want to be judged or feel like we're, not moral people or we're not fair. But we're doing this anyway. So I think by shedding light on that and really talking about it, it does two things. One, it makes us more aware of our own preferences, and we start to sort of unpack that and say like, oh, well, why do I really like someone? Why am I really attracted to them? Is it just my personal preference, or maybe I've never seen a person like this before and I've never thought about it? And it also, I think, just by playing the game, you're exposed to a greater spectrum of faces, particularly those of people of color. And I think people see faces there that they wouldn't expect. In our media, it's not very representative. So you might see color combinations and skin tone combinations that go, oh, that's interesting, that's compelling. And, so that was kind of my goal.
Now, I'm not going to lie and say that I don't see color, but that is the thing. I'm like, oh, you don't see color. Mm-hmm. There was times in this game where I felt like the race was ambiguous in a way that I had thought somebody was white, and you were like, oh, you like black women. I was like, oh, wow. And then I start looking at it. Do you purposely make it so that these races kind of blend and you're not exactly certain? Like, how did you take on race? And I guess the other question I should have asked before the interview, are you the artist behind these cards?
I am the artist, yeah. So I designed the game and I drew all of the features. And so there's a feature in this game that it doesn't work, it has nothing to do with the mechanics, and that's that each card has a doppelganger, which means that they have the exact same facial template, but their coloring, just their coloring has been changed. And the reason why I did that and didn't, make it something, it's not meaningful in the game as far as like how you play, I did that because I wanted people to sort of question the nature of race in general and understand that if I ask someone, what makes someone black or white, oftentimes people just will go, oh, well, it must be skin color. Or if not that, oh, well, it must be a feature like hair or nose or something like that. But really, it's this combination, and you start to see how superficial and how fluid those boundaries are when you look at this game. Because all of the cards were actually drawn as black women in my mind.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were. But again, I'm a mixed-race black woman, so I already understand it. There are these boundaries and these codes where we determine that this person is now going to be white or this person's going to be black. And it's a lot more subtle than people tend to think about. Again, that sort of leads back to my statement about representation. Because we tend to see things as very binary, I often give the example that black women in particular in media, it's gotten a little bit better now, but a few years ago when I first developed the game, you see either Beyonce or Viola Davis. And what I mean by that is there's this sort of Europeanized, mixed-race, light-skinned black woman with long hair, these features that are more, considered white and appealing. Or you see the dark-skinned black woman who's matronly, she's not meant to be sexually appealing, she's some kind of servant, a different second-class citizen. And we don't see much in between. And often, there's like a token. So in this game, you're in a situation I think many people haven't been in before, where they're asked to look at and evaluate. You might have a spread that's all black women. So there are 4 black women in front of you. And what happens there is it forces you to not tokenize, which is something we do naturally. I know people do it. And it's I'm not judging people in that sense. We do
It's something that I think if you say you don't, it's a lie. You can't help it. It's just something that goes in.
It's how our brain works. When you see one thing that's different, it's easy to identify it as the different thing. So in other media, you might say, oh, that's the black woman. But in this game, there are 3 black women in front of you. And so now you have to say, oh, I prefer this one. And it's not because of the wide nose or the big lips. It's like, oh, no, they all have these features. So you're really starting to see the subtle differences between people's features. And I think and I hope appreciating those differences, and really it humanizes, I think, each of the individuals. Even though they're illustrations, I think they evoke a certain
What's funny about the illustrations is they feel so relatable. Like it feels like almost like these pictures are pictures of somebody in a dream. It's real, but it also feels dreamlike, which makes it so that you can kind of imagine it. Which kind of changed my angle. When I first started, I thought I was sitting down to be a funny guy, like doing Cards Against Humanity, and my first judgment was just simply on looks. But what happened in the rounds with these strangers was we started talking about, this headband, for instance, means maybe this person's sporty, or this hairstyle means that they might be quirky. I'm hoping that, I'm wondering if that's part of your objective, to find out, can you find personality traits through small things?
So that is entirely the dynamics of the players. When I created the system, I had one thing in mind. It wasn't to convince people of like the beauty and value of black women or women of color. It was really just to get people to reflect. And I thought a lot about how I could present maybe an argument for people to consider that worked with any kind of player. Because, so this is a game that it easily could be described as an empathy game, or a serious game, or, a social justice game. And it has
with the wrong group of people, it could be like a shallow game.
It could,
like a very,
exactly.
That's when I first started saying why I thought somebody was pretty, I was feeling self-conscious of like, wow, I'm really picking these human beings apart and then putting these women in a discard pile.
Exactly, no, and it can be played just like you're saying, that way where it's like, oh, I'm just going to tear these women apart. So I was aware of that, and I wanted to make a game that could be played by either player, and they would get the value that I was trying to impart, which is, I think that even if you're trying to be the funny person and you're trying to kind of like crap on all of these women, just by staring at these cards and paying so much attention and having to be so specific and distinguishing what's good or bad between them, you're still just that level of exposure and that thought. There's no way you're not going to walk away from the table still reflecting on the things that you said and the things that you did. And you have this peer group, right? So that creates this element where, depending on who you're playing with, you're going to walk away with different things. You're going to be held more responsible. And so to me, when you're designing games, I designed the system. Once I presented that, if I did a good job, then you can walk away with maybe a constellation of experiences that hopefully are positive. But, it's still, I'm not hitting you over the head. I'm not telling you what to think.
No, I love that part of it. Like, the instructions are very simple. It feels very much like use your human nature to play this game. And hopefully the human nature is good. I thought it was a really wonderful experience because I was not expecting this. Like, I was expecting something completely different. And I am reflecting on something that I've spent 0 time thinking about in my life. So I think that's pretty neat. So what are your goals? I saw that you got Twitter going on, and I heard you mention Kickstarter. Tell us what your goals are with the game.
So my goals with the game now are to, I never really fully published it. I am a media artist, and so I did a small run of 100. It was basically like an art project. But now, especially during our current political climate, I think a game like this would be really important. And so my goal is to launch a Kickstarter in the next couple of months and actually expand the deck. Right now, it's all portraits of women. And also, I was drawing them all as black women. I really want to up the ethnic diversity and also, create a spectrum of gender that's present and see how that changes the game when, you have more gender fluidity and you're playing with people of different genders and saying, okay, well, how now are we evaluating attractiveness? What does this mean? I think it's going to be a really interesting game. So
cool. Last question. Should have put this before the last part. Who do you think's tougher on these women so far that you've been playing with, guys or girls?
So that's an interesting question. I actually don't think of it that way at all. I think it's who's tougher on themselves. I think that when men and masculine people play this game, they feel more pressure and they feel more anxiety playing. Whereas, women and femme people come play this game, it's like, oh, we've been doing this to ourselves for years. So, I play with reckless abandon. I'm not worried about anyone judging me because I'm like, I've been judging myself and other women my entire life. I did it this morning when I put my, eyeliner on. So it's easy for me. Whereas I do think that, masculine people they're doing it, but they're not used to doing it publicly and so vocally with, other people watching them. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, Leah, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the game, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.